Okay, people, do not tempt me with a good time today. This is National Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Month, and this week we're going to be focusing on I couldn't even whittle down the amount of topics I want to talk to you about in today's episode regarding fruits and vegetables. Fresh fruits and vegetables are packed with essential vitamins, minerals, and fiber, all of the things that we want you to include in your daily meals that contribute to your overall health and well-being. So let's start first with just defining the difference between what a fruit and a vegetable is. A fruit in a botanical definition is the fleshy or dry ripened ovary. I'm taking this out of the Britannica dictionary of a flowering plant. So you recognize the term ovary. Yes, that's correct. There is biological language used because plants are organisms as well. And this is enclosing a seed or a seed. So this is why when you're looking at a fruit, the best way to determine whether it's a fruit or a vegetable, botanically speaking, is there a seed in it? So things like apricots, grapes, but also beans and tomatoes, and technically an avocado. An avocado is a fruit. Now, savory wise, taste wise, some things might feel a little bit sweeter or a little bit more savory. And so in the case of something like a tomato or an avocado, you'll usually see them in the more vegetable sense, using them in the vegetable sense when we do things like, recipes and creating lists for you and that. And as far as a vegetable is concerned, a vegetable is any kind of plant or plant product that is referring to the fresh edible portion of a root or a stem or a leaf or a flower. So a plant could be something like lettuce, kale, your leafy greens would probably fall under that as well. I'm trying to think in my head, like something like a pumpkin or a squash technically has seeds in it. So botanically speaking, they are going to be fruits. But every time I think of a vegetable, I often think of things like squash and cucumbers, etc. All right, so let's get to the meat. That's not a pun intended in this case. It's the anti-pun intended because we're talking about fruits and vegetables. But the meat of the matter is in the United States, only 1 in 10 adults is currently meeting the recommended, I was going to say mandated, but recommended requirements of fruit and vegetable recommendations. These are every 5 to 10 years or so, our government and the powers that be, based on research, puts together guidelines. So we have something called the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and that gets updated every so often based on our current issues at hand, chronic conditions, etc. And really, the recommendations are not that bad. So if you're not a fruit or vegetable lover, then maybe just kind of easing into some things. And I'm definitely going to be giving you a lot of helpful hints and tips and tricks to see how you can include fruits and vegetables into your already existing diet. Again, side note, assuming that you have access to quality produce items. And even though it does say that this is the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Awareness Month, I also want to just recognize that canned products and frozen foods are just as good, sometimes even better, depending on if they're flash frozen. It's just a matter of reading your labels, and I won't go off into a tangent with that, but I just want to acknowledge that anything that you are implementing into your diet that is health conscious, I don't want to give you too much of a hierarchy there. I just want to acknowledge that, whatever you can make happen, convenience wise, budget wise, better than nothing. So let's get back to as far as what is recommended for our daily diets for adults, about 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit. And if you are watching me on YouTube, a cup is like the size of your rounded fist, or like, what can fit into a pretty big bulky area of a cupped palm. That's about a cup if you don't feel like weighing and measuring things, which I usually advise against. So just kind of eyeballing something around the size of a deck of cards or a baseball. I think that's also what we use as to what is a cup of serving size. So we have 1.5 to 2 cups of fruits and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per day. That's it. Eat 5 things. That's all, right? Mix and match as much as you possibly can. When it comes to children and adolescents, a little bit less than that, 1 to 2 cups of fruit and 1 to 3 cups of vegetables per day as well. So just as I said before, the average American is not consuming enough. And this is where we start seeing complications with things like chronic heart issues, kidney issues, diabetes, etc. Slight modifications in your diet and lifestyle will often, usually, hopefully, help increase your ability to overcome things or slow the progression of something getting worse, or maybe even reduce your risk of having something happen to begin with. All right, so let's talk right now as I'm recording this. This is June, and this is officially the National Fresh Fruits and Vegetables Awareness Month. So, in season for this month in the United States, we had, I'm reading off a list here. So, if you're watching me do this, I can't remember all this stuff. So, we have berries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. Juicy, sweet, great for adding an accompaniment to a savory salad. Like a spinach salad is great with sliced strawberries. You could also use them in place of or in addition to a dessert if you're craving something really sweet. I prefer blueberries on fresh blueberries, or I'll add them into my smoothies, but fresh blueberries I'll add onto my oatmeal. Strawberries, same thing. I could eat them plain, or in, a yogurt product or something like that. I don't love raspberries or blackberries. There's something about the fuzziness of them that I'm not a huge fan of. So if you are reading, if you are watching this or listening to it, feel free to interact with me somewhere on social media, or if you have the ability to engage in discourse, because there are some areas where obviously in YouTube you can comment on the comment section. In the podcast that we drop, there's Q&A or polls listed here, so feel free to drop what your go-to fruits or vegetables are this month or these days that you're listening to this or watching this particular episode. Okay, next on the list are stone fruits. So those are things like cherries and peaches and plums and apricots. I have this really weird thing with peaches too. I don't know if it's a fuzzy texture thing that off puts me, but I don't mind them grilled. Like I really like when they're caramelized in a way too, because sometimes that draws out the natural sweetness to it if they're not already sweet, like if they're a little too tart or tangy. Next up on the fruits list, at least for what's in season right now in June, we have melons, so watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew. I'm a huge melon fan. Love, love, love cantaloupe especially. Honeydew I'm not so fond of. Sometimes I find it a little bit bland and a little too watery, but cantaloupe I love. And then we have tropical fruits, which technically are available year round because we import them from other places that grow these things a lot of times that are, much more climate appropriate. So things like mangoes and pineapples, again, tangy, sweet, juicy, great for mixing into a smoothie, but also, oh man, I love pineapple or mango salsa. I think that is a great accompaniment. Very, very fresh, refreshing, and a fun thing to bring to picnics or barbecues as well. And then other things too, like grapes and figs, those are currently in season as well. So that's the fruit list. Depending on where you live or when you're listening to this, some of those fruits might not be available in the fresh form, which is why I was saying before, feel free to go and buy frozen or canned if that's easier for you. Just be mindful of any additional ingredients like canned peaches in water versus canned peaches in syrup, especially if you're trying to be careful with extra added sugars. So just making informed decision before you grab whatever might be most convenient for you or budget friendly. All right, vegetables. Leafy greens are pretty much always in season anyway, but leafy greens like spinach and kale and Swiss chard. Listen, contrary to belief, as a dietitian, I don't love kale. Actually, I'm gonna just say I don't love it. I don't want to say hate, that's kind of strong, but I don't love it. I find it hard to chew. I find it bitter. And yes, I know you can massage it with your oils and your dressings and you can saute it, but it just never feels like it breaks down enough for me. And I really just don't love it, the texture of it. So I tend to go for softer greens that I can enjoy both in raw or cooked form. So spinach and Swiss chard or collard greens are my go-to leafy greens. Lettuces too, like red leaf lettuce or romaine. I like that as well too if I want a little bit more crunch. Cruciferous vegetables. So again, we're kind of in the same family of what I just mentioned. You have broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage and Brussels sprouts. Those are excellent for steaming or roasting. Some of these things you can also eat raw and dip through stuff. Like you can do a shredded Brussels sprout slaw, or you can do raw broccoli with, ranch dip, ranch dressing. Then we have what's known as the allium family. So the allium, there's also a really pretty flower that I just saw in New York City that is part of this family. It's a very skinny, skinny stem with a poof on the top of it, kind of like a hardier version of a dandelion, and that is part of the allium family, as are garlic and onions and green onions too. So this is great if you're trying to be mindful of salt or other sort of seasonings that you might not be able to ingest or you might be impartial to. So adding something like chopped garlic, chopped onions, sautéing them in your dressings, or I should say infusing them in your dressings. And then if you don't love the true crunch of it, you can, scoop them out and remove them and just get that infused flavor instead. Roots and tubers are also usually available year round too. So we have things like beets and carrots and potatoes and radishes. Again, really earthy, crunchy, adding a lot of texture and variety. I love raw carrots. I hate cooked carrots. So again, right, like it's okay to have certain likes and dislikes when it comes to fruits and vegetables. Side note too here, it could very well be how you grew up with these foods. So you can consider something that you might not like or have liked as a young person. And now maybe as you're getting older, you're experimenting with some different flavors and cooking methods and giving these things that you didn't love another chance. Then we have things like squashes. I said earlier too, like pumpkin or zucchini, yellow squash, etc. So these are very mild, great for grilling. So sometimes we'll have these. I don't want to say in place of a steak because zucchini doesn't cut it for me, and zucchini doesn't cut it for me with pasta either. I'm Italian. I know the difference between a zoodle and a noodle, but there's a lot of versatility in these types of foods. And again, you can eat these things both raw or cooked. Peppers, bell peppers, chili peppers. Fun fact about peppers, they're very high on the vitamin C scale in comparison to something like a citrus fruit or even a strawberry. So if you are in need of increasing your iron intake, and say you're iron deficient or you're being told you're anemic, so if you have iron deficient anemia, or if you're pregnant and you might need extra iron in your diet in addition to supplements that you might be taking, you can also add a vitamin C rich food to an iron rich food to help increase the absorbability into your body. So, for example, if you are purely vegan or vegetarian and you're not getting vegan in particular, if you're not getting any animal products and you're eating iron rich plant based foods, so almost all of your leafy greens and a lot of other vegetables will have iron in it, but it's not the same form of iron that you would find in an animal food. So, if you add a little bit of vitamin C richness to it, whether it's through a pepper, a sliced pepper, or squeeze of lemon juice or sliced strawberries, as I mentioned before, that's a great way to boost up the bioavailability of your iron rich foods. Other things like tomatoes and cucumbers and eggplants, again, in season at their peak quality, especially tomatoes. Oh, I don't know about you, but I don't love a mushy, pale, mealy tomato. I find it very off-putting. Of course, if I have the ability to get them, off season, then what I'll probably do is cook them or roast them and try to add some other seasonings to it just to make it a little bit more palatable. So focus on whatever might be in season in your neck of the woods. And if you're listening to this outside of the summer season where these items are a little bit more in peak, then consider maybe buying them in a frozen or a canned version instead. All right, let's talk about phytochemicals. So phytochemicals are these naturally occurring chemical substances that automatically come with plants, and they provide various health benefits. You can usually tell what they are based on the color of the food. So this is why you might hear some of your nutrition professionals saying things like eat the rainbow, because we want to encourage you to get a variety of vitamins and minerals in whatever you can. So the more diverse and the more mixed up balanced type of meals you can make. If you see something missing from your diet, like I haven't had something red or green in a while, consider throwing in some sort of fruit or vegetable to add in whatever might be missing from that mineral and vitamin micronutrient. So they could play a significant role in helping you maintain your health and preventing disease. They are known also sometimes as antioxidants, meaning that they help protect our cells from any of the extreme environmental factors that can be cancer causing or just end up wearing and tearing us a little bit quicker than we want them to. I'm not going to have a great time pronouncing some of these things, so please bear with me. But the phytochemicals that are more common you might see, so we have carotenoids, okay, carotenoids, carrot, think of carrots or anything orange or deep yellow in that color, those are usually your sources of carotenoids. That's beta carotene and lycopene and lutein. That's all part of that same family. You have things like carrots and sweet potatoes and tomatoes and watermelon. And you also have other things like spinach and kale and corn and even eggs. Okay, that's fun, right? Eggs carry lutein and I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Zeaxanthin. I think it's pronounced zeaxanthin. So these help with protecting against. Carrots are good for your eyes. That's why, right? So things like macular degeneration and cataract, so vision. And just a little quick side note, when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking about the whole food in whatever form you're making it versus the supplement. So we always try to go with the whole food first, and the supplement is in addition to that. It is very rare that you're going to overconsume the micronutrients that you need in a whole food or a whole food based meal, but you can very well overdo it if you're taking supplements, vitamin, mineral pills, etc. So I just want to clarify that before I move on to the next category. The next category is flavonoids. So we have things like quercetin, catechins, and anthocyanins. I know. Trust me when I say I'm having a hard time pronouncing these. You might be having a hard time hearing me pronounce these. So this is going to be chemical compounds that are found in things like apples, green tea, blueberries, and cabbage and cherries. So again, here, if you're thinking of the color, some of these are like white and green or blue or black or red sometimes is in there as well. So again, these deeply rich colored things, but also things that are not deeply rich colored either. And these are anti-inflammatory and also antihistamine effects. So this helps support your cardiovascular system, cardiovascular health. There's antioxidants property in them as well. And I'm trying to think of other, cognitive functions, right? A lot of these things are going to help support your brain health as well. Okay, next up we have glucosinolates. And these are found in things like your cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage and kale and all those crunchy things that may or may not give you some tummy issues, some gas bubbles going on there, but they're good for you, my friends. And these are things that are very high up on the anti-cancer properties. So it helps with supporting that antioxidant factor, so making sure we're protecting your cells, and it also helps support our natural detoxification process. So the things that our liver and kidneys do, things like these cruciferous vegetables are helping support that. Those chemicals find their way into whatever chemical functions are going on inside of our body and help support that. All right, next up we have phenolic acids, and these are things found in coffee, coffee grains, coffee grounds, fruits, especially berries, and whole grains and seeds. So some of the health benefits that come from here, again, antioxidant properties, may also help with reducing inflammation and supporting our immune function. So I think I might have to do an episode on just inflammation at some point because it's a little hard to explain, but our body can be in various states of inflammation for a variety of different reasons, whether you're fighting an infection or you're healing from a sunburn or you're dealing with a condition like cancer or you're going for treatments for something or you're taking medicines for something. Body composition issues too might result in inflammation as well. So we don't really know how and when our body is under it, but to help support or reduce the process of being inflamed, keeping in a variety of these fruits and vegetables and other products, like I just mentioned, would help support that function and immunity too. So immunity comes, we've talked about this a bazillion times, usually in your gut. Your gut is very closely related to helping build your immune system. So if you find yourself, coming down with colds a lot of times, aside from, making sure you're washing your hands and being protected in some way, we don't necessarily need to be super sterile in our lives, but a lot of these fruits and vegetables can help with supporting our gut health and in turn supporting our immune system and helping build and strengthen our immune system. All right, Next up, we have phytoestrogens. Phytoestrogens, isoflavones, and lignans are part of the phytoestrogen family. And these are things from soy-based products. So soybeans, tofu, tempeh, which is a fermented soybean product as well. So if you're vegan, you're in luck because you probably do eat some form of these things. Also, the lignans in that family are found in things like seeds, so flax seeds and sesame seeds, and also things like whole grains and some fruits and vegetables as well. So we understand the phytoestrogens may support bone health, Possibly help reduce menopausal symptoms, maybe. A lot of research is not unfortunately, a lot of research is not done on a lot of fruits and vegetables with human subjects. So sometimes we'll see research-based results on something, but there's always more research that can be done on these things. And every single person is different depending on not just menopausal, but whatever symptoms you're going through and whatever you happen to be managing or suffering from can really depend on what other factors are going on in your life. But just know there's no harm in maybe adding some of those seeds and things in there. And of course, how much is too much of anything? So I tend to say just, a handful of whatever, mix it up. Every other day, put a handful of something that you didn't have the day before into your meals. Potential cancer properties as well, heart health support in that too. The next family of phytochemicals is called terpenes, limonene, and carotenoids. So this is also related to that one in the beginning that I mentioned too. But in this particular case, we're talking about things like citrus fruits, including the peels and the oils. So if you've ever cut open or sliced open an orange or a lemon or a lime, and you see that little burst, that spritz that happens in there, or you push together the peel itself and you rub it around the rim of a glass if you're doing some kind of fancy drink, hopefully non-alcoholic, then those oils that come from the rinds are also included in these families of these phytochemicals here too. So carrots, sweet potatoes, citrus fruits, etc. All of these things can help with supporting anti-inflammatory functions, anti-cancer, and also help support your digestive health too. So citrus is a little tricky. Some people don't love it. Some people feel like it can give them some, heartburn. So if you're avoiding anything acidic or you don't love it, that's okay, because you can always go to other things and add those things to your diet. Let's talk a little bit about adding things to your diet. I mentioned eating the rainbow, right? So let's start with a tip of when you look down at your plate or you're making yourself a smoothie or whatever. What are the colors that are involved in there? Is there anything that you've been missing from the things that I've mentioned here where, hopefully you can visualize the colors of these fruits and vegetables and think of a variety of different things. Even if you have some selective eating, like you don't love everything, but you love some things, again, putting them on rotation every other day or so and adding something else into your meal, or even as far as a handful of, seeds or nuts or whatever the case may be, mixing things up like that as well. Did I say this already? I don't think I said this already. I'm more of a vegetable person than a fruit person. But when it comes to summer, I definitely love summer fruits. I love watermelon. I love cherries and berries and things that are really peak season. So that's where I'll probably end up going shopping for whatever happens to be in season. Otherwise, I'm usually a vegetable person. All right, so that's eating the rainbow. That's tip number one. Try to just look at your meals when you're making them and think, what else could I add here? Even on a pizza. If you're eating a pizza, cheese pizza, and you don't necessarily want to have to put together a whole side salad, but maybe like me, I have a handful of raw arugula or raw baby spinach. I'll throw that on top of the pizza and it'll kind of like, wilt as the heat gets to it. And I'm like, boom, there's one serving of my vegetables for the day. And plus the tomato sauce that's on there. Technically, that counts too. All right, cruciferous vegetables. So again, if you don't love the way certain things like broccoli make you feel in your gut, then you can try to have different kinds of ways of cooking them down to soften them a little bit, break down that fibrous quality to them. Or when you're cooking them, make sure you also add some vitamin C rich foods on there too. So maybe you include some peppers or a drizzle of lemon juice. Berries, really brightly colored berries, especially if you are like me, if you have a sweet tooth. This is where I love having like strawberries and whipped cream, or adding berries to my yogurt or something, just to add a berry, deeply colored berries to my diet. So I'm not going to go too much into detail just yet, but soybeans and soy products, there are some conflicting research studies out there that if you happen to have a history of cancer or might be at risk for cancer as far as genetically predisposed in your family history, soy products do have things like what are called phytoestrogens. So sometimes what I've read is it can help prevent, or it has anti-cancer properties to it. Or if you're dealing with already existing cancer conditions or managing a cancer treatment, then you might want to avoid soy products. So I'm going to leave that up to you to discuss with your own doctor and dietitian and determine whether or not you're interested in that, and just look up some of the research that's in there with your healthcare professional to make the right decisions for you. All right, last up, herbs and spices. Y'all, I feel like these are the unsung heroes and the forgotten heroes too. We season things a lot with salt and pepper, but we forget about dried and ground and fresh herbs and spices. So even something as, no offense to parsley, but parsley can be kind of boring, but even something like freshly chopped parsley on a salad or on a meal or on top of a mound of whatever, right? On top of spaghetti or something like that. It brings out that flavor. There's like a, I don't even know how to describe it, like a coolness, like a hint of a tangy pungence there too, that just adds a little bit of a layer of a flavor profile. Like it adds a little bit more depth or complexity. So I really encourage you to play around and experiment with different types of herbs and spices. Again, whether it's fresh, because some of those are a little expensive and you buy them and there's far too many and you can't use them all in the same day sometimes. And so you can dry them out if you want to, or you can purchase the already dried or ground versions of these things. So parsley, basil, rosemary, turmeric, ginger, cayenne pepper, cumin, coriander. I'm thinking in my head all the things that I have in my pantry, in my kitchen. I said thyme already. I might have said thyme. So by the way, right, don't just like open it up and dump it onto your dish or your recipe, whatever you're making. Take a sniff. And if you feel comfortable enough, maybe, just put some a little bit on a teaspoon and just taste it. See if you can determine what goes with what. I always find that so cool, especially when we're teaching our students how to learn how to cook or get more involved in textures and flavors, especially when we're dealing with people who have aversions or limited eating, like a limited eating palate, or people who might have to have modified textures, like if they're pureed foods because they can't chew and swallow. So we really try to bring attention to the different flavors and the way to kind of jazz things up and appreciate the importance of having a variety of seasonings. All right, so now let's talk about something else that comes up a lot on social media. And I feel like I want to say with all due respect, but no, not with any respect, to people who scare the heck out of you when it comes to eating fruits and vegetables. So you might hear things like fruit has too much sugar, or you can't eat vegetables because they contain anti-nutrients. So I'm just going to say what I always say. The toxicity or the poison, whatever it is that you're doing as a detriment to your health or your eating habits, is in the dosage. Just by nature, literally by nature, all produce items are going to have some sort of chemical compounds that protect them as well as protect us. So we just talked about phytochemicals, right? Those are the chemical compounds that help with protecting our cells and different properties that can increase, cancer fighting things or help improve cardiovascular health, et cetera. But then we also have naturally occurring compounds known as anti-nutrients, and those are helping plants like fend off disease or bugs or whatever. So again, it's not like you're eating a bushel of anything on any given day. So when we hear the word anti-nutrients, we're really talking about some things that can interfere with the absorption of something. But this happens also in other forms too, not just plants. Like for instance, I'm thinking of calcium. Calcium can be found in animal products like dairy, right? Milk, yogurt, cheese, etc. If you're eating a ton of dairy products, that can interfere with the absorption of iron. So as a dietitian, when I see somebody who's been told that they've been diagnosed with, as I mentioned as an example earlier, iron deficient anemia, right? I mentioned earlier, if you might have that, you might want to increase your amount of vitamin C because that helps with absorbing the iron. But on the other hand, if you're taking in too much calcium in your diet, whether it's through supplementation or you're drinking, 4 glasses of milk a day and 2 things of yogurt, et cetera, that can interfere with the absorption of iron too. So it's not just the plants, everything kind of has these qualities to it. It's just recognizing that some things are beneficial in certain amounts and some things are going to be maybe a little bit detrimental in certain amounts. So let's talk about those and just acknowledge it. Okay, so we have something called phytates or phytic acids. These are things that are found in whole grains, seeds, legumes. Legumes are anything from peanuts to beans as well. And these are going to bind to certain minerals like iron and zinc and magnesium, which could potentially reduce their absorption. But the benefit of a phytate is that it does act as an antioxidant as well, and it can protect against cancer. So again, how much you're eating, mixing up your diet, having a diversified plan of action like meal plans and putting things on rotation, a little bit of everything here and there. Hopefully you won't suffer the consequences. But if you do end up being iron deficient or zinc deficient or calcium deficient, that could be one of those things that you're taking a look at. Maybe I eat too many beans, or maybe I had too many sprouts, or maybe I had too many grains in the course of the last couple of weeks, and I might need to diversify my diet a little bit more. Next up are oxalates. All right, here's where I get a little bit angry too, because lately I've been seeing so many of my own colleagues fight me on this, but I stand by what happened to me. So oxalates and oxalic acid are found in things like spinach and beet greens and some berries and chocolate as well. And it can bind to calcium, and it could potentially contribute to kidney stones. So I'm just going to give you an anecdote. Okay, so this is not research, evidence-based research that I'm sharing with you. As an anecdote, me personally, when I switched to more of a vegetarian/vegan diet about 20 years ago, my go-to green was spinach. And so every time I had a salad or a side dish of vegetables, I would always throw a handful of spinach in there thinking, I'm adding my serving of vegetables to my meals, not realizing. And again, this is where now people, online will probably fight me on this and say it's not proven. But in my case, it was, because over the course of 2 weeks, I was eating an excessive amount of spinach, probably above and beyond what the recommended amount is. And I do believe that the oxalates accumulated because I ended up with 2 kidney stones. I want to stop here and ask you to think about this for a second. Whether or not you've ever given birth to a child or you've ever had the kidney stones, a kidney stone. I'm told, I've never given birth to a child, but I'm told the pain is similar. And I can vouch that that kidney stone was crazy. I ended up in the hospital, emergency room. I had to get morphine. In the case for me, it was a small enough kidney stone that it did end up passing. So I just had to drink a lot of fluids and make sure I was urinating frequently to kind of push that kidney stone out. But some other more complicated or larger forms of kidney stones have to get blasted out or maybe even be surgically removed. So I'm just giving you a heads up. I still eat spinach, but I try to, again, right, like I said earlier, I try to diversify my diet. So maybe one day I'm doing spinach, another day I'm doing no green foods. And then the next day, instead of spinach, I'm doing a leafy green that is not spinach related. So something like romaine lettuce or iceberg or something a little bit uh, lighter in color, not dark greens. Okay, next up are tannins. So these are things that are found in berries and legumes and nuts, but also in things like teas and coffee and some processed foods or fermented foods like wine. So this can inhibit the absorption of iron because again, they attach to things, but there's also benefits to it too. So, black tea, green tea, great qualities to them, coffee, great qualities to them. So it's just a matter of how much of too much is anything. And that's very person to person specific. So I don't want to give any guidelines as to how much you should or should not be drinking, but I would just say again, see how much you're getting of certain things. Try not to drink, 17 cups of coffee in a day. That could potentially add up. And if you are finding yourself to be iron deficient or have iron deficient anemia, maybe that's related to an excessive consumption of coffee as an example. All right, next up are lectins. Lectins can be found in a lot of controversial videos across YouTube that make me crazy. So I'm just going to get on my soapbox and say, please be careful of who you're listening to. Try not to give in to fear mongering. Try to be conscientious that even the best qualified healthcare professionals, people who have, MDs, and also the most popular celebrity or influencers on the social media platforms are sometimes cherry picking their research study. So they might be citing information to you and they're only showing you the stuff that supports their side of things. So just be conscientious of it. Again, I always err on the side of fruits and vegetables are going to be beneficial no matter what. You don't have to have a vegan diet if you don't want to, but please be sure you're including some of these things because they're helpful to us. So again, lectins are a part of the legume family, grains, and some things like tomatoes and potatoes as well. It's possible they can interfere in interact with absorption of certain nutrients, and they might cause some digestive discomfort. So I just said earlier too, if you eat a lot of beans and lentils and peas, yeah, they're very fibrous. And so by nature, they're going to break down into your small intestine, and your large intestine will be utilizing those as well. And sometimes they give you lower gut bubbles, like, bloating and maybe some cramping too, depending on how much. So you can soak those things, you can drain them as well. You can cook them just to reduce that content, not just of the fibrousness of it, but also the lectin content as well, if you're nervous about that too. Same thing with something called saponins or saponins. I don't know how to, I said I don't know how to pronounce these things, so I apologize. But these can also be found in things like legumes, and also things like quinoa and soybeans, and maybe even some herbs. And this can also be interrupting the absorption of some nutrients as well. So again, but antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, and also some cholesterol lowering benefits too. So again, how much of too much is anything? How did you get to the place that you ended up with? If you have a diagnosis that may or may not have been your fault, you didn't know, or there's just outside entities that, led you to a particular place in life. But then just because certain amount of something is beneficial doesn't mean more of that thing is better. So I would always say err on the side of just being moderate with any of your food choices, no matter what they are. Last up are glucosinolates. So these are found in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cabbage. This can interfere with iodine uptake. So if you have a thyroid issue, goiter, and any other iodine related deficiencies or issues as well, this is something that you might want to be conscientious about. Now, again, with the caveat of almost never does something have to be completely taken out of your diet unless you are suffering from a true diagnosed food allergy where you could potentially die from even having the smallest amount of something. Usually you could make use of consistent intake and portion appropriate intake of something in order for it not to interfere. So again, if you're noticing certain things like something's inflamed or you're having issues with your thyroid, then maybe you might have to cut back a little bit on all of your dark leafy greens and your cruciferous vegetables. Cooking things down too. Again, different properties and different chemical reactions happen when you eat something raw versus cooked. So sometimes that does help break down the chemical structure that stops it from interacting, but it depends on how much, etc. All right, so while anti-nutrients could maybe interrupt or reduce the absorption of certain minerals, they're also very, very helpful and can prevent a lot of things from happening too. So let's recap that. Diversify your diet. Eat a variety of foods as often as you can. Mix and match some stuff. Put things on rotation every few days or so. Bring it back in, take it out, etc. Food preparation, consider raw versus cooked, soaking, sprouting, fermenting, sauteing, roasting. That can potentially reduce the levels of those anti-nutrients found as well. Pair things up. So again, you wouldn't know this just from this conversation that I'm sharing with you here, but if you work with the dietitian and we get to kind of cross-check what we call your nutrient analysis, like we're assessing what you eat in a day or in a week, we can say, oh, here we go. When you pair this thing up with this thing, it's possible it can interact. But when you pair this thing up with this thing, they marry nicely and they help with increasing or enhancing that absorption. And moderation, right? So this is a little bit tricky for people who might have some more selective eating habits or a limited range of foods that they do want. As an example, my mom, who loves to eat, but her conditions are very opposite. The things that help with her heart are things that hurt her kidneys. So she has a limited list of foods that she feels safe with. So again, moderating the portions that she's eating and putting things, mixing and matching certain things that do or do not go well with each other, she can at least have the benefits of the foods that she's eating and not suffer any of the consequences of that, the pairing up of interacting. Okay, if you do not like tastes and textures of fruits and vegetables, again, I would challenge you or encourage you, experiment with stuff. No offense to whoever made food for you in the beginning of your life. Maybe they just weren't cooking it well or they didn't know how to cook. So maybe try things new. Try different herbs and spices with something. Roast something instead of eating it raw. Try and experiment little things like that. As a rule, usually when we're teaching people about childhood eating patterns and helping parents or caregivers or guardians with raising and teaching their children how to eat and what to eat, we usually say you're going to be giving them a variety of things, but you're going to be exposing them to things many, many times over in different forms, because there will be something that they'll eventually like and they'll stick with it. So you could do that, put things on rotation, but maybe try something different that you're like, oh, now I finally decided that I do like green beans or lima beans or whatever. Other things too, think of different ways that you can, I don't love saying hiding things because I hate being deceptive, but if you need to quote unquote sneak fruits and veggies into your diet, then maybe combining something into something like a smoothie, or, some sort of milkshake-ish concoction. I'm also thinking like mashed potatoes, you can kind of like puree spinach or cauliflower or other types of vegetables and add it into something that you already like. So it's masking the taste of it. So as an example, I'm sure I've shared this before in some of the other episodes, but as an example, what I do with my smoothie, when I make my smoothie, this is what's in it: water, a splash of milk or almond milk, depending on what I feel like that day, a handful of raw spinach or any kind of leafy green, but not I'm not doing like, romaine lettuce in it or like iceberg lettuce in it. I'll usually do the collards or the Swiss chard or the spinach. So a darker leafy green in it, raw. Sliced strawberries or banana, half of a banana, something that's sweet in there as well. Then if I've done the almond milk, then I won't do the yogurt, but sometimes I'll put yogurt in there instead. And then I'll usually do like two tablespoons of peanut butter. I'm not gonna lie, it takes some getting used to sometimes. So again, you might have to adjust the ratio of what is in there, but I don't necessarily recommend just constantly adding, 17 bananas to a smoothie to make it taste sweeter. Try to get used to how things are in their natural state. If it feels a little bitter or tangy, then yes, you might want to mask the taste of it, but I would say still make sure that you're adding stuff in there. And over the course of time, just like anything, like you're taking out added sugar from your coffee drinking, or you're reducing the amount of, sweets that you're having, like me, because I keep bringing up sweets a lot because I do have a sweet tooth. Your taste buds will eventually get used to that. So for my case, I can hand my concoction to somebody and they'll immediately tell me like it tastes like I just mowed the lawn with my face, if that's what their flavors are coming out. In my case, because I'm used to it, I'm okay with the flavor of it, but I want to make sure that I can at least taste a strawberry flavor or a banana flavor in there. So you can, kind of hide that in there. All right, you can also turn things into soups and sauces. So large one-pot meals are a great way to add vegetables like carrots, or, if you're shredding something down or pureeing something into a creamier texture. I don't love cauliflower and broccoli, but if you like cauliflower and broccoli, that could be another way that you're adding vegetables into your diet. Bake it into recipes. So this is fun too. Again, not everything has to be healthified. If you want a cookie, allow yourself the freedom of having a cookie. But if you want to increase some of the health components in what you're eating, there are things like black bean brownies. I've had them and they're delicious. I've also added something like avocado to a chocolate mousse or a chocolate pudding recipe. So that's been kind of fun too, to play around with things. Pumpkin and zucchini bread. Love pumpkin and zucchini bread. So that's the way that you can add things into your meals and feel like you've checked off your serving recommendation. I mentioned earlier too about using different herbs and spices, or trying different cooking methods, or using dips, right? So if you puree chickpeas into a hummus recipe, or black beans, again, that's a good example too, like a spread or a dip. So it might be a a mechanism of that makes things taste better, that you're using, cut up carrots that maybe you enjoy, and you're adding it to a dip of whatever it is, like a vegetable, like a hummus or red peppers or something like that. Okay, I think I've gotten through a lot of information, that I've covered a lot of topics related to fruits and vegetables. I also encourage you, try out different cultures, different cuisines. I think I shared this in either the meal planning or the mindful eating episode from maybe season 7 it was. I can't remember. I might link it here. But different ethnicities, different cultures, different parts of the world use flavors in different ways. So as an example, the French will usually have kind of like soft, silky flavors to things like garlic and wine and lemon and butter, right? They're all kind of like silky and smooth and similar profile, where Indian cooking might have really complex and a lot of layers on that, and pungent flavors as well. So they might use paprika and cumin and coriander. And there's like, 50 different combinations of spices that they're using in one meal, which is why it's quite labor intensive and sometimes a little costly too to make meals like that. So try different cuisines, like even if you're getting takeout, like Thai vegetable curry or an Indian saag paneer, Mediterranean vegetables, like think of the different things that use different herbs and spices that might help with getting in more variety and allowing you to increase your intake of fruits and vegetables. If you have any of your own ideas, recipe ideas, or anything that you might be considering for your go-to snacks or how to include more fruits and vegetables that you think work well for you or your loved ones that you are helping to feed, please leave a comment. Share with me, us, the Dish with Dina crew. Tag us on social media. We'd love to see what you are doing to get more fruits and vegetables into your daily meals.